All right. Welcome, everybody, to the coup d'etat of boxing. First of all, I've got to give a big shout out to the legendary John Beltran for the opening credits. Track entitled Paris is Burning. But I hope, for the sake of my co-host official, that Paris isn't burning. Otherwise, he'll have to hightail the hell out of there and maybe relocate to some war zone in Marseille or somewhere, official.
Exactly. Thank you for well wishes. I hope it doesn't happen, at least not for the duration of this podcast, because we have so much to talk about.
Absolutely. So the coup d'etat of boxing is a live weekly YouTube podcast, a joint collaboration between myself, Corruption in Boxing, and my co-host, Official Scorecard Boxing Science. Moving on a little bit now, I don't know what it is. What is it? 5th or the 6th episode? The coup d'etat of boxing. It's a blow against the state of conventional boxing talk, as well as, lame and lethargic boxing channels who have just been annoying us for a number of years. So we thought we'd get this collaboration going and get into some deep scientific boxing talk, talking about certain fighters that have maybe a little bit obscure, polarizing for fighters, perhaps those that have been shrouded in sort of pre-misconceptions or racial bias. So we're kind of giving a light on, weight classes that are not even talked about as well. So kind of a contemporary take on an old classic sport. First thing I've got to do is apologize for the non-transmission last week. I was in the hospital having shrapnel removed. An official scorecard, he was wounded, lying on the battlefield somewhere. He managed to relay a mobile signal off a drone just to advise you that there wouldn't be any transmission. So, apologies for that. Enemy forces were jamming our communication, so we couldn't get a proper broadcast from our respective locations. But all is well now. A lot to talk about. We've got a major fight happening next week. But given our absence last week, I thought we will start off with a fight that surpassed all expectations last week. A fight that was, when it was first announced, it was a juicy, enthralling sort of encounter that us hardcore boxing fans were looking forward to. But unfortunately, it was delayed and it couldn't be helped. It really comes down to the fighters, whether they're willing to fight under these circumstances of, reduced wages and, a lack of a crowd. So you can't blame them if they're not willing to undertake, such endeavors. But fortunately, Ivan Baranchyk and Jose Zepeda, looking both of them to get back into championship contention, they were more than happy to lock horns from the United States and deliver just a vicious, enthralling, sort of immersive fight. As boxing fans, we're always sort of anticipating, we're always, prognosticating, we always, urging for, toe-to-toe action, a lot of drama, back and forth, competitive fights, which are becoming almost becoming a scarcity in boxing at the moment. But both of these guys delivered. Jose Zepeda, his inspiration for this fight definitely was the disappointment he suffered with the unified champion Ramirez. A close fight. But a close fight is not going to go to the challenger. It's going to go to the champion, who's definitely backed heavily by the promoter in ESPN and Top Rank. Zepeda, back foot southpaw boxer, boxed extremely well in the fight. Perhaps not as aggressive as to seize the championships off Ramirez. So a close decision. He wasn't going to get it. And I guess that was his impetus to really set forth his aggression in this fight. But he chose a tank in Ivan Baranchyk, who's built like the housing projects in Baltimore, which you see in The Wire. His back is so big. You can actually watch a rerun of the fight on his back. Just a tank that just an untamed beast that just loves to come forward with his power punches. Former IBF 140 champion. So he was the champion coming into, or held one of the championship belts coming into it, having lost it to Josh Taylor. So he was looking to get back into contention with another mandatory spot. In Jose Ramirez waiting on the line, it would have been a rematch for Zepeda if he'd prevailed. It would have been Baranchyk and Zepeda, Baranchyk and Ramirez. Something new there. Quite a very interesting 140 division. There's a lot of good fighters, a lot of good up and coming fighters. We've had the World Boxing Super Series champion Josh Taylor waiting in the wings for Jose Ramirez. We've got Jack Catterall, one of the Man the Two challengers as well. So different fighters from all over the world, waiting patiently to see what was going to happen. And these two guys just put on an absolute old school clinique. As fighters, as boxing fans, we normally, scoring fights patiently, knockdowns a few and far between. But in this fight, official, it was quite a challenge just to keep in track with the number of knockdowns which were transpiring. I couldn't even gauge what round the fight was moving into. It was just knockdown after knockdown. A lot of them flash knockdowns, but delivered with scintillating punches. Baranchyk came out with that leaping left hand he likes to throw, super aggressive. Not really a fighter to utilize his jab that much. Had the size, had the power. It looked like, his punches were physically moving Zepeda, who is not really a fighter who likes to engage at that sort of mid-range too much. Very good footwork, very good lateral movement. But in this fight, it was a case of Zepeda's shorter, straighter, tighter, more compact punches, finding openings in Barancyk's wide arcing, talking, heavy hooks, predominantly power punching, not setting up too much, not too much subtleties, not too much variation in these tactics. Zepeda, as I mentioned, his defense was, he pretty much abandoned it. He was looking to make a statement in this fight, not looking to replicate the same mistakes he did with Ramirez. Kind of a dangerous strategy against a ferocious power puncher in Baranchyk, who had Josh Taylor reeling in the second half of that fight as well. So a very dangerous customer. But Baranchyk, who's been involved in great fights, even on the PBC before, a couple of years ago, where he was getting knocked down, getting back up and knocking down his opponents. So he's very familiar with the canvas, but he can recover. Still quite a young man, in his sort of mid-20s. So he's had tough fights coming into it. He's been on a bit of a murder as well of fighters coming into it. So Zepeda was getting hit, knocked down with single punches, but he was rising pretty much straight away. He wasn't extending the count too much to 8 or 9, composing himself. So it didn't look significantly hurt. But in the end, official, Zepeda, after, I think it may have been 4 knockdowns each, 5th round, after being knockdown for the fourth time. Zepeda rose, looked okay. Baranchyk inevitably comes marauding in. His momentum, I guess, exacerbates the brutality and the velocity of the punch. And it was just a magnificent straight left hand that absolutely murked him. A vicious knockout. Baranchyk fell in a very precarious position. It almost looked like he'd broken his leg sort of hanging up. There were some concerns regarding his mouthpiece, whether they should have removed it straight away. But no, you've got to wait until you've got to allow somebody on the canvas for a certain period, look at their reactions. You've got to ensure that his jaw isn't broken, because you don't want to be forcing a mouthpiece out. Took a little while to recover, but I think he's okay. I think the signs were later on in the ambulance, and that he was, smiling, conscious, responding. But a tremendous war official.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, first of all, there are a lot of things I would like to say about this fight that I risk to get all over the place, and I may forget to mention a lot of things. But yeah, what a war, amazing fight. I don't want to talk a lot about how good it was, because definitely it was a great fight of the year this year. But yeah, anyways, I heard a couple of people saying that they didn't enjoy the fight as much as some other classics, which I can understand as well, because in between the the numerous knockdowns, what was happening was the exchanges were not extremely clean. There was some clinching, as well as both of them, especially Zepeda, trying to stay out of range. So I get it, but in general, a fantastic fight. Now, I was not surprised about. I was not expecting such an explosive fight, but I was not surprised that Zepeda won, despite Baranchyk being the favorite. Now, yeah, I felt to make a preview video about the fight because I didn't have enough of time, but I was watching two of Zepeda's fights, as well as Baranchyk versus Taylor. Now, difference in what Baranchyk was doing is in this fight versus what he was doing against Taylor is that he was much more aggressive. He was showing less respect to Zepeda than he was showing to Taylor. But also, Zepeda was able to exploit some things that Taylor couldn't, because Taylor, as a much taller fighter than both of them, you would say he should be trying to weave underneath Baranchyk's left hook to get to the blind angle, but because of his height, he was forced to back up and retreat in straight lines against Baranchyk. So he didn't have many opportunities to get his right foot outside of Baranchyk's left foot. But at the same time, now about Zepeda, I saw that his game is all about getting that front foot in a superior position. and leaning over his back foot to evade the opponent's left jab to then come up with his own jab or a check hook and exit. And so I knew that there are going to be many opportunities for Baranchyk to land that left hook, but as well for Zepeda to set up his left hand, and the way he's setting it up in his fights that I saw is that he always goes with that right hook to make the opponent lean, to duck underneath and set them up for the left hand, and that's how a couple of knockdowns happened, and the knockout at the end. Yeah, I can. I mean, for now, that's all that I'm going to say about this fight. I'll let you talk more about it, and then I can, if you want, I can talk a little more about both of them from the technical point.
Not too much more we can sort of articulate on this fight, but the thing with Zepeda is who's generally, defensively is a lot more of a conscious sort of back foot counter punching, that sort of style. But he was only taking sort of short incremental steps to get out of range. But with Baranchyk is that given the degree of his movement when he's throwing the punches, you've almost got to double your back foot game. So one step will have to be two to get out of range. So he was taking one step, which ultimately proved insufficient. So Baranchyk was able to bridge any sort of gap with that momentum he has, that sort of leaping Madrimov kind of style he has. So for somebody like that, you've really got to get out of the line. Not your ability to sort of react to that by taking steps is quite difficult. If you're just moving in straight directions, you literally got to sidestep out of the way. You've got to move laterally around, and that's what Zepeda was actually very good at. But he just got drawn into a dogfight. I think both of them were just in that trance. The defenses just went out the window. It was just a shootout at the OK Corral. Who basically had who had who had the ability not only just to absorb the punches but to inflict damage on the other. I think both of them were almost like, all right, if we're going to play chicken and try and knock each other out, then so be it. And it was just one of those fights. As a spectator, you could just enjoy. No point being overcritical about the lack of technical boxing or no defensive masterclass on display. It's a fight. Enjoy it for what it is. It's entertainment during the lockdown period. Boxing has not been too exciting recently. Cards are starting to get a little bit better. The PBC card, the week before was as predictable as they come. So this was significantly better, and it was on free TV. So, people have just got to try and rejoice and enjoy what's on offer, rather than being financially induced to be leveraging $80 or $90 or whatever else. So Zepeda moves forward. He's back into contention. Not sure when the mandatory spot is going to be called. It looks like, from what I'm hearing, official Jack Catterall, who is mandatory for one of Josh Taylor's belts, he looks to be a little bit more accommodating. I think he's willing to step aside, according to Frank Warren over the weekend, to allow Ramirez and Josh Taylor to contest their undisputed world championship on the provision that the winner will fight Jack Catterall. that'll be the next mandatory being called. So a logical sort of pragmatic step, why fight for 2 belts when you can fight for all 4? Not that he has any chance of beating either guy, but you never know. Anything is possible in the fight game. So it looks like the Undisputed Championship will be the next fight official, which fantastic. That's exactly what we want. And Jack Cattle will be waiting in the wings. Any thoughts on that?
To be honest with you, I haven't seen enough of him, so I don't want to talk about something that I'm not really aware of. But however, what I would like to say is huge respect to this whole 140 pound division, because they're giving us great fights, great matchups, and hopefully we see that unification. So it's a good thing. I mean, look, I don't want to hate on Crawford, but pretty much all of you know my stance on him very well. I'm giving all the respect to him for becoming the undisputed at 140. But beside the postal fight, there was not real competition for him, and this era of 140 pounders is much stronger, and we are getting fantastic fights. So this is something to really get excited about.
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure whether Cattle was mandatory for Ramirez or Josh Taylor. It might have been Ramirez, I think, but it it's it's a moot point. The Undisputed will happen, so we'll wait for that. Not sure whether it's going to happen this year, maybe the early part of the next year, but the fight will happen probably in the United States, given that Josh is now with an international co-promotional deal with ESPN Top Ranks, so that makes sense in the States. Also, last week there was a matchroom card. Joshua Buatsi was headlining against Marko Calic, but the one significant fight was in the women's division. We had Chantelle Cameron up against a Brazilian, Adriana Araujo, who was clearly watching, studying tapes of Uniel Dorticos for this fight, because the Brazilian was just, replicating Ed 209 in the ring was just absolutely useless, allowing Chantelle, who's normally a front foot pressure fighter, to box on the back foot, knowing that her opponent Adriana had significantly missed weight by about 5 pounds, so couldn't win the vacant championship. Rehydrated, looked about 2 weight divisions too much. Chantelle Cameron actually boxed quite well on the back foot. Had to make that adjustment. Haven't really seen her do that in the past. Was just able to sharp shoot and just sniper off the back foot, moving laterally up against a robotic sort of straight lines. Somebody who clearly hadn't studied trigonometry. Comprehensive sort of 10-round victory. So she picks up a world championship. Now he's looking to fight, against the overhyped and overrated and extremely fortunate Katie Taylor, who should really have 2 defeats. So hopefully Chantelle can just end that fraudulent reign and we can move on from that. And Joshua Buatsi, who Eddie Hearn is clearly destroying any sort of momentum that this quite a talented sort of light heavyweight fighter has. Has been doing absolutely nothing, fighting absolutely no one. But they seem more interested in a vitriol with Frank Warren and Anthony Yard, and But Eddie Hearn has so many light heavyweights who Joshua Buatsi can fight. Callum Johnson and people like that. But there's been no significant domestic matchups for him. Calic was a decent fighter, has fought in the World Series of Boxing as well. Had some good victories. Competent fighter, tall, sort of 6'3", 6'4". It definitely caused Buatsi some problems. Who is vulnerable to those fighters who can certainly move off the line. Can punch and turn, come back with straight left hands, straight right hands. Definitely gave him a little bit of adversity here and there. Undefeated fighter as well. So it was competition that Buatsi really should have had, at least, sort of 12 months ago, as his career is just, stagnating. But he managed to get through it, come back with a stoppage victory, sort of mid to late rounds. I don't recall the exact, but yeah, he seemed a little bit disillusioned in the post fight. Quite a politeful individual, doesn't really express his true feelings. As he should be highly critical of Eddie Hearn, who is just stunting his momentum. His counterpart Anthony Yarde has already fought for a world championship, and they've just been criticizing him left, right, and center. So, at least Yarde has that experience. He's made good money as well. Whereas Buatsi is just, I don't know. He needs to step it up now. I'm not sure where he is ranked, but they need to get him back out. They need to get him back out certainly before the end of this year as well, and just keep building on that. Next year, he should be getting a world championship title fight at some point, provided that whatever competition he has, he gets through. Maybe somebody like an Elidia Alvarez would be perfect for him. A former world champion who's definitely on the decline, a veteran stage. Somebody like that would be a great test for Buatsi. Get a victory like that, give him some real confidence, then he can go into. I'm not sure whether he's going to be able, whether he has the ability to challenge some of the champions at the moment. Artur Batarbiev and got Joe Smith waiting for. We've got the two Russians fighting for one of the other belts as well. So not sure which path Eddie Hearn is going to take, but we'll wait and see. I don't think you saw this fight, did you, Official?
No, I missed the fight, but yeah, I would agree with you. See, I saw about two fights from Buatsi, and he's a talented fighter. I think I saw him on the undercard of Povetkin versus Huey Fury. He was looking really good, and I don't know what the hell Hearn is doing. You're completely right about him. Now, fighting Elder Alvarez, yeah, I would say it's a good move. It would be a good move because Elder is way past it, and he doesn't have huge pumping output. He can do well against him. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll move on to the fights which took place yesterday or in the early hours of this morning. The major fights were taking place on the ESPN Top Rank card. We had a championship fight at 126 pounds featherweight. Shakur Stevenson having vacated the WBO World Championship and moving up to super featherweight. That allowed Emanuel Navarrete, who vacated his super bantamweight World Championship, to move up and fight undefeated Ruben Villa, who was bringing only around 5 knockouts. And I think Emanuel Navarrete may have around sort of 24 out of 28 knockouts. So, judging by that record, very heavy-handed fighter. Navarrete was definitely struggling a little bit at the weight at a super bantamweight, so it was a good time for him to move up. Been very active during the last 12 months. May have been his 6th or 7th fight. Been fighting a little bit in Mexico, but he's been keeping himself busy. Competition hasn't been anything significant. But he's keeping himself active, and you can't blame a fighter for that. But it was very decent matchmaking on the part of Bob Arum, Ruben Villa, who had never gone beyond 6 rounds or something. I think, even though when you have 5 knockouts, it's a bit of a paradox. Southpaw Emanuel Navarrete having a 6-inch reach advantage. Fight going to the cards, but Emanuel Navarrete starting very quick, inflicted 2 knockdowns within the first 4 rounds. Now, official, let's get into this. The first knockdown, which was extraordinary, because it was a lead uppercut delivered by Emanuel. Normally, when you're executing those sort of uppercuts, the closer your fist and your elbows are to your chest, the greater the leverage you can generate off the canvas, and the greater power that you can actually generate from your shoulders into that punch. But with Emanuel Navarrete, he starts off the punch. His elbow position, or the glove, is literally beside his left knee. He's got his body opened up. He was setting up Ruben Villa in the first round, just with left hook power punches. So Villa was very conscious of that, but he opens that punch up. He opens up his body, starts the punch there, and when he's literally landing the punch, his left arm is almost straight. So the only power that is being generated is literally from his elbows contracting in his wrist. He can really get no other dense muscles in force to actually throw that punch, and he's still able to drop Ruben Villa with that punch. Combination of Villa not expecting it, definitely, which he's expecting that left hook, but so Navarrete disguised it quite well. But so he's he's very early on in the fight as well, but with hardly any leverage, as I mentioned, just literally power coming from your elbow and your wrist, just to get that little snap up in the punch, almost delivered with a straight arm. He's definitely got some bricks in that left hand, official.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Being that, and that uppercut wasn't the only punch that he threw that way. In fact, most of his hooks and uppercuts are thrown from a very long range for these kinds of punches. So it really speaks volume of how hard he hits. Now, on the other hand, I would also add that he is. You can say about him that he's a weight bully because he's still huge. I mean, this was just his second fight at 126, and he still looks huge compared to his opponent. So it's not that surprising, but yeah, man, he got power because, like I told you. Most of the times he throws his hooks, uppercuts. They're extremely long range hooks and uppercuts, and he looks clumsy while throwing them. But I have an explanation even for him getting off balance. I'll get later into it, but yeah, man. It shows you that the way he throws them, the way he caught Rhea with that uppercut, it was the power was generated from his shoulder and from his arm, and like you said, his wrist. He didn't put his body into that punch, just an arm punch, and still dropped him hard.
I mean, Villa managed to get up, and he was boxing, relatively. I wouldn't say well, but he was able to use back foot, use two steps back, sometimes get off the line, and making Navarrete definitely miss. He was just looking to load up on the power punches, but it was clearly the case that Emmanuel Navarrete wasn't phased. He knew that his opponent had absolutely no punching power, um, so he wasn't worried about any punches that were coming back at him. Pretty much able just to walk him down in cruise control, looking to land the one perfect punch. He was definitely looking to land that lead uppercut he has as well. But the second knockdown, I think it was in the fourth, that was also a bizarre situation where Navarrete actually changed levels, came down from a low position, um, to slip first of all Villa's his lead hand. So Villa can see him coming up, potentially coming up with the up jab with the lead hand. So Villa steps back, and he's actually not a bad idea because Navarrete he's slowly raising his head. So he's coming up with his body. So Villa senses that, and he's stepping back, and he's looking to land that his own left hand uppercut. But Navarrete comes back, and before he even can see the punch, because it's out of the peripheral of his vision, he's coming from low to up, and he's just comes up with that straight short left hand, and Veer is back down back down on his ass on the canvas as well. Crazy angles, crazy positions that Navarrete have, but he just has that instinct of landing those punches at that range official.
You know what? In fact, to me personally, I think that fourth round knockdown is the best way to explain the whole Navarrete style. Watching him, and keep in mind, for some reason, I missed both fights he had against. Um, oh, what's his name? Isaac Dugbo. For some reason, I still haven't watched them. So I'm still doing my homework on Navarrete. This was only the second fight from him I was able to catch. And the first one was against Fletcher Lord's grandson. And even in that fight, I saw that he's just like it happened during that knockdown in the fourth round. What he's doing is he looks to get off balance. I mean, the way he throws his punches, every time he springs forward with his punches, he's getting off balance. But to me, he's like really looking to counter the counter. In that regard, he kind of reminds me of Janriel Casimero, who does similar things, but who unlike Navarrete, when he throws a vault punch and misses with it, and his face is facing the canvas, he just steps, use a side step, moves laterally to evade any possible repercussion from his opponent, any counter. While unlike him, what Navarrete is doing is he throws a wild punch, gets off balance, and is hoping for his opponent to try to catch him with a singular counter punch, so he could just move his head and come up with another punch. It's kind of like also what Kovalev, what Pacquiao is doing when he leaps in with that short hook, kind of hook jab hybrid. He throws a power hand so far away in front of him, he gets off balance, and instead of falling completely off balance, he uses that momentum to pushes off his front foot and jumps up with another punch that his opponent is not expecting. And yeah, Navarrete is similar to them in that regard. Throws, just like you said, crazy punches from awkward angles, and you never know what he's gonna do.
I mean, I would say definitely go back and watch the Isaac Dogbe fights. I mean, if you're a Ghanaian, then you're going to be in tears because they were comprehensive beatings. Um, I was kind of following Isaac Dogbe before I even interacted with his his PR consultant and some people from his camp as well. Kind of a brawler, pressure fighter who likes to sit on the chest. Prodigious, quite a very good body puncher, but he's only like 160 something centimeters. He's 5'2", 5'3". I don't know what the hell he is. He's about a size. You've got fighters at even flyweight who are fighters even at strawweight who are taller than Isaac Dogbe. So when you're a pressure fighter like that and you're looking to get close to Navarrete, man, you're gonna have to go through a significant minefield, and Navarrete was able to find a home for that lead uppercut. Was able to move quite well as well. Gave Dogbe a hell of a beating in the first fight, which went to points. But Dogbe definitely hurt Navarrete many in that fight as well. So he's not impervious to pain or getting outboxed or getting outfought. You know, Luis Neri showed you can outfight him. And Ruben Veer in the second half of the fight, official, I think he recovered reasonably well again. And or Navarrete may have been in cruise control, no dangers, no chance of getting hurt. But Veer didn't box that bad for the last 4 or 5 fights. He did get hurt with 1 or 2 uppercuts, but he showed in the fight that if you do use good footwork, you can fight on the back foot. You can counter. You can slip and counter punch. You could make a Navarrete miss and make him look quite clumsy at times as well. Who's looking? You know, he's a prodigious power puncher. The stats show that he's a power puncher. You know, he's so arrogant, so confident in his ability. He's just looking to land that one perfect punch. You know, that could be to his detriment later on because you can, therefore, by that scenario, win rounds against him. No, he's probably thinking that I'm going to knock you out. He's not thinking about points, so he can afford to lose rounds. He's always got that ability to knock you out or to inflict significant damage, maybe inflict multiple knockdowns. So his mental frame is very much like what Deontay Wilder's was, you know, who was pretty much losing rounds against every fighter. But Deontay thinking that I've got the knockout waiting, and then eventually I'm going to land it, and then you're not going to get up. Now, really has elements of that sort of mentality that he kind of manifests. Kind of dangerous because there are fighters at this sort of weight class who can fight, can box. I think he's reasonably happy that Shakur Stevenson has vacated the belt and moved up because Shakur does possess those attributes, what aforementioned, that can cause Emanuel all sorts of problems. He's also a much bigger physical sort of fighter who can box very well on the back foot, can make the fight a little bit ugly as well, doesn't have to engage too much, can fight long as well. So that'll be the one style that Navarrete will have to definitely improve upon. He definitely has to utilize his jab a lot more. Gets a little bit too predictable. It's getting a little bit too off balance as well. This was a gimme fight for him to win a world championship belt. Typical Bob Arum. 126. Who we got? We got WBC champion Gary Russell. Um, that fight seems very highly unlikely. Um, Josh Warrington and Emanuel Navarrete. Official, that'd be a tasty fight.
Oh, it would be. But you know what? Speaking of the ways to beat Navarrete,
Yeah,
uh, look, I would say, and I've been always saying this. There is any style can beat any style. It's just about how good you are at your particular style. It's a no-brainer. But what Via was doing was quite nice. Only that Via too was getting kinda, he was, how do you say it? He was getting kind of predictable, always circling to the same side, trying to time Navarrete, and he was able to time him when getting off balance, but Navarrete was able to time him too while trying to pivot on his right foot, catching him with that left hook while he was turning. But he was trying good things. I would just say he was a bit too hesitant, a bit too predictable. Uh, Certainly in the first 7 or 8 rounds, but I cannot blame him for that because uh, what he was landing some excellent counter punches while getting Navarrete off balance, but the thing is he doesn't have a power to really hurt him. So I was thinking if that was a more powerful fighter landing those punches, those counter punches on Navarrete, he would get hurt. But it was not the case with Villa, who's a very light puncher, and yeah, but he was trying good things and trying to keep him off balance. The lateral movement, it was all good from him. But I would say also a good inside fighter who would push Navarrete on the back foot uh, would stand a good chance against him because he always needs the room, even when throwing his combos at short range. He needs the room to throw them. So if he had an opponent who would smother him, go chest to chest against him, it could look bad for him as well. But the question is him being so big and so powerful at even at 126.
Villa
Uh,
Villa was
no
actually
problem.
trying to do that. Official, I think later on Villa was trying to smother his attacks, but Navarrete would use that forearm to push him off.
Yeah, that's true. I saw it especially around 7, 8, 9th round.
Yeah,
But you know what? I was not really scoring this fight because I paid much more attention to Navarrete because, like I told you, I'm still doing my homework on him. But from, let's say, about from the ninth up till the 11th round, Villa was doing a great job. I think from the ninth to 11th round, I gave Villa all the rounds because he finally started piecing Navarrete up, and Navarrete got also kind of tired. Then he stepped up in the last round. He really came out guns blazing in the last round, Navarrete. But ninth, 10th, 11th round, uh, we was doing some really great work. And speaking of the scorecards, I don't know if I would really agree with such close scorecards because in the first 7 or 8 rounds, yeah, there were times where Villa was landing his punches and getting Navarrete off balance, making a miss all the time. But uh, in uh, in the landed punches department, it was not really a big difference. And plus, similar to the Lomachenko versus Charlo or Golovkin, uh, Navarrete was landing much better, more powerful punches. So it was
Agreed.
not.
You-
One last thing, I would say, yeah, maybe out of those first 7, 8 rounds, maybe you could give Villa 1 or 2 rounds, but those are still very close rounds where he still got out hurt.
Absolutely. If we look at the 12 rounds as a whole, if the cards were close and Emanuel had two 10-8 rounds plus wobbled Villa in the 12th, I think, with an uppercut as well. So, in accordance with the scorecards, Villa won, you know, significantly more rounds than I felt he had won. Now, the difference between the two, Villa may have landed about 60, 65 jabs, something like that, according to my tally. Navarrete correspondingly landed around 70, 75 power punches as opposed to jabs. So he was the aggressor. Villa was landing clean punches, but he couldn't win Emanuel Navarrete's respect at all. Didn't alter his game plan, didn't reduce his work rate, didn't fatigue him. So his aggression was ultimately not effective. So Navarrete, for me, official, um, if you factor in the 4 numerical advantages on the knockdowns, I think he wins the fight. You don't want to get too much over complex the matter, but he won the fight comfortably by 5, 6 points, something like that.
Yes, I would say so. And yes, by the way, Villa from the mid rounds on, he was really doing some great work with his jab stepping out, but which bring us back again to the old story that we were already mentioning on the previous episodes of this show, kind of separating jabs from power punches, because there are fighters whose jab can be as hard as anyone other's power punches, but it's all about power, man. You can have a crazy hard jab like Golovkin, Kovalev, or someone else, but then what Ria was doing was just scoring jabs, not shooting it through the target, but at the target, not piercing through his target. It was just a scoring, you know. It was nice to see beautiful passing, beautiful jab from him stepping back while Navarrete was overreaching, but nothing really effective. And in those rounds, Navarrete was still hurting him and landing serious punches.
All right, so Manuel Navarrete moves on. We'll wait and see what happens. To me, a perfect fight would be if now Inoue, if he manages to dispose of John Real Casemiro and move up, him and Navarrete at 126 pounds, top rank, that'd be a super fight. All right, one other fight official we'll talk briefly about, has some implications. Over in the UK at middleweight, Liam Williams from Wales, who's in the mandatory position for Demetrius Andrade's WBO. He had a stay busy fight. My God, did Liam Williams? He's like a crack addict, searching furiously for his misplaced crack pipe. Vicious.
Absolutely.
He's just a completely changed fighter. Soon as they had a clash of heads, as you do with the difference in styles, he was reminiscing to what Liam Beefy Smith, that motherfucker, did to him with a flying E Honda headbutt. in the ninth when Liam Smith had won all of the early. I thought he won every single round against Liam Smith. But he landed one of the most vicious and disgusting premeditated headbutts, which split his eyelid. So his corner was very, very concerned regarding the safety of their fighter, and they foolishly stepped in and called a halt to the proceedings, not forcing the referee to do so. It was, but that's what happens, spontaneously when you have a very close corner and a fighter. But so Williams, as soon as he saw the blood streaming down his head, he just, boy oh boy, did he just march forward, and he just took out the guy finished him off with a left hook to the body. Some evil intentions, and a very good underrated fighter. Maybe he hasn't had the best competition, but he's a fighter who he'll come out from the opening bell with evil intentions, and he's going to look to take your head off. He's not looking to box the way he did in the first sort of phase of his career. He's now just looking to take you out, and it's not a bad idea. Up against a boxer, so there'd be a good clash of styles. I wouldn't want to be in Demetrius Andrade's boots for all the hookers in Amsterdam, because Williams is going to inflict some pain on that boy. Official, I'm not sure whether you saw the fight.
Yes, I did. And corruption, indeed. I think that Andrade is already agreeing with you, because from what I read on Twitter earlier today, he's mentioning moving up to 168 and becoming a three-weight world champion. He wants to fight, what's his name, Billy Joe Saunders at 168. And he says that the Williams fight would do nothing for him. And it's crazy. I mean, look, stylistically, yeah, if Williams fights him just the way he fought in his last fight last night, yeah, you can say Andrade would be able to beat him, but I'm not so sure. I have to do my homework of both of them, but one thing I know for sure is that in my mind, Andrade is an overrated fighter, overhyped fighter. I mean, he has a nice footwork, but he's so clumsy. He's getting off balance. He's all over the place, and he's so fucking easy to counter. It's not like Williams isn't, especially when he comes out guns blazing like he did in this fight. But I think that he would be able to, from the top of my head, he would be able to break Andrade down. And yeah, such a shame. It would be a clear duck, in my opinion, if he refuses to fight Williams, who's is mandatory, right?
Yeah. See, the one advantage that Demetrius might think that he has over Liam is that he can box on the back foot. But the one ace card that Liam Williams has, and it was actually something what Josh Warrington had against Lee Selby, and that was underrated foot speed to get to the target, something Lee Selby just didn't anticipate. And that's something that Liam Williams has. So if Demetrius, if hypothetically, if that fight goes ahead, thinks that he can just like use his length and just box from the outside, pick him off, sharpshoot him, move. Liam can get to Demetrius quicker than what Demetrius could probably land at the jab. And one thing Liam Williams does have, he has a power jab and he has a power up jab, which he tends to land a lot on because he's only 5'10". So his opponent was taller in Atlantis. Fox was around 6'4", and we could see Williams, landing a very hard, thudding, not a stun jab, it's a power jab, an up jab, and somebody like Demetrius, who's 6'1", something like that. Liam could hit him at will, I think, with that jab. So head and body, with the aggression and the power I think he has and the determination he has now to win the championship, I think, yeah, it's not a bad idea if Demetrius wants to, vacate and do what the hell he wants. His career has been a bit of a facade at the moment. Although I'll give him one grace that, Canelo Alvarez has ducked him over 2 weight categories. Demetrius has been chasing him and it needs mandatory, but Canelo has vacated 2 belts to get away from him. Not saying that Demetrius would beat him, but I think Oscar De La Hoya looked at the Erislandy Lara in the Austrian trout fight and said that, Demetrius would pose similar difficulties to Canelo. So I think he advised him to stay away from Demetrius. So if he wants to fight, a washed up Billy Joe Saunders now, it's a pity that fight didn't happen before. I don't know, why hasn't Billy Joe Saunders fought Callum Smith? I thought the whole point of Billy Joe moving to Matchroom, Frank Warren was more than happy to let him go because, he had just signed Dennis McCann and that's a tremendous prospect he has. So he thought, fuck, Billy Joe is not doing anything. He can go now. So that fight you would have thought would be far more straightforward being under the same promotional company. Well, why hasn't any of them fought, Danny Jacobs, who's thereabouts as well? So I don't know. I really hope Liam Williams he gets his title shot because it seems to waste of time what's happening with the matchroom fighters over there. But anyway, official will I think that's pretty much all of the recaps and the post fights done. Now we'll move on to next Saturday and the best fight of the year thus far in terms of sort of anticipation. Fight taking place at 135 pounds, lightweight, multiple belts in contention. Vasiliy Lomachenko defending 2 of his belts. And there's also the WBC franchise or French fries champion, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
I don't think Teofimo Lopez can win should he beat him. So I don't quite understand the equation. But Teofimo Lopez, he's putting forth his IBF championship. So if Vasiliy was to win, then technically he would have held or currently holds all of the championships. So there's one argument that you can make that he would be undisputed champion because the WBC have actually altered the equation by introducing a belt that rescinds the value of the WBC championship by allowing a fighter who they feel is a special fighter to be elevated to the franchise championship status. So clearly, in their own eyes, the WBC franchise champion has superiority over the WBC now regular championship. Vasiliy having never lost the WBC championship. The only argument would be that Mikey Garcia held 2 of the belts and vacated, moving up to welterweight. But that doesn't matter. That was his own choice. He didn't want to fight Vasiliy. Money was his proclivity, moving up to welterweight. So Teofimo Lopez, having been fast-tracked by Top Rank, having defeated Richard Comey for the IBF championship, credit to him in one respect, is immediately challenging Vasiliy Lomachenko. That may be more due to sort of arrogance and in his sort of obnoxious nature. The fight was originally scheduled, but Teofimo Lopez was haggling about money and feeling that a proportional reduction would be more acute for him, given that Vasiliy has a $4 million guarantee. But when you've achieved what he has done so in the sport, and you are the pound for pound number one fighter, there's nothing sort of subjective in that argument. Terence Crawford is after 6 years is finally fighting at at his correct weight category. Vasiliy, as we keep hearing, is fighting at 135 pounds. I've watched him from 2010 onwards. His perfect weight is around 130, so he's fighting at 135 pounds. He's fighting fighters who are significantly taller, longer, heavier, stronger than him. So Terence Crawford doesn't really have an argument, and he's fighting, let's face it, he's fighting just washed up fighters after the other. So Vasiliy is clearly and in tune with the true concept of the pound for pound, the way it was devised, is incontrovertibly the pound for pound number one fighter in the world. I think if Alexander Usyk wins a heavyweight world championship, then he has an argument, because to move up to heavyweight and be fighting, the biggest and strongest athletes in the world, that's a major bridge to jump up and achieve that. So that'll be you can definitely make the argument. But Vasiliy, number one at the moment, freeweight world champion. Lopez finally agreeing to the fight behind closed doors. Has been extremely vocal in the build up. A lot of unpleasantries are changed inevitably between the two fighters. Now, that's what you kind of expect from Lopez and his father, who's made so much racial slanders in the past with fighters like when he was fighting Mashuishi Nakatani and Richard Kosei. Not a man who embodies class or respect for anybody else, and that's kind of been advocated by Teofimo as well, who's official. A lot of interesting statements that Lopez has made in the build-up. On the one hand, he's been talking about Vasiliy being unable to fight on the back foot, and maybe that's an indication to the strategy that he's going to implement in this fight. Now, Lopez is generally an ambush counter-puncher, does have power in both hands, but he's not a prodigious combination puncher. I'll give him credit in the Richard Kosei fight, and that's the fight I want to talk about, because he made a significant adjustment in round 2, which led to the knockout. And I heard a lot of narratives beforehand regarding what happened, and I don't think they're incorrect. Sorry, I don't think they're correct. And I'll explain why. Now, in the first round, Richard Kosei was having the better of the exchanges, but contrary to what people were thinking, it wasn't Richard Kosei's jab which was having the detrimental effect. It was actually Richard Kosei's counter right hand which was causing Lopez trouble, and you could see Lopez's his look on his face changing as well. Now, Lopez would try and land one of his stun sort of jabs, but what Richard Kosei was doing, he was getting to the outside and he was coming back with a counter right hand, and he landed 3 of them in the first round. Quite hard punches as well. Very good skills Richard Kosei was showing, but he was boxing at sort of a longer range, and So Lopez realizing that he had to make adjustments on firing his jab, and what he did in the second round, Richard Comey got a little bit too overconfident, and he decided to come in a little bit more, so the distance between them was a little bit shorter. Now, what Lopez did is that he feinted to throw the jab, so he feinted with his upper body and his lead hand. Comey reacted straight away, thinking that Lopez would fire, his stun jab, so he would come back with the same counter right hand that was working in the first round. But instead, Lopez got the prime position on the outside, so Comey came through, initiating the sequence with his right hand. But Lopez was able to, knowing that Comey was going to come with his right hand, was able to counter his counter with his own, right hand, getting position away on the outside. Now, when you're at that sort of age, 22 years old, you've got better twitch muscles. Richard Comey had been in significant wars, been knocked out beforehand as well, so he doesn't really have the same reactions to what somebody like Lopez does. So, and we're talking very, very split margins, and that punch landed flush, and Comey was never really able to recover. Went down, was wobbling. He was very much like Trevor Berbick up against, Mike Tyson. So there was not. So that was. It showed that Lopez does have the ability to make the adjustments, but Richard Comey, if we really analyze him, his best victory was against a washed up, Raimundo Beltran. Comey being hurt very, very badly against Robert Easter, who was one of the worst champions in any of the 17 weight categories in the last 10 years, had absolutely no power, and he was able to hurt Richard Comey at multiple points during the fight, and significantly in the 12th round as well, perhaps then getting the decision on the cards as well. So Richard Comey really had no punch resistance. A good fighter, but he was not the same fighter from years before. Became a little bit more of a stationary type of fighter. He wasn't always like that, but he had better movement early on in his days when he was Commonwealth champion as well. Was a much better fighter back then. But so kind of a superficial sort of victory. Lopez didn't really see too much. If Comey had maybe kept the fight a little bit longer, a little bit more patient, it would have been more of a difficult fight. But he's fought a southpaw before in Diego Magdaleno as well. A Magdaleno who had been knocked out by Terry Flanagan in 2 rounds, but it took Lopez a lot longer than that. Magdaleno was able to get lead foot advantage, and was able to box quite well. Lopez didn't look too good in that fight. He really wasn't really too concerned about the punching power of Magdaleno. With him in that fight, it was, you'll take punches to land his own punches. What Lopez tends to do as well is he's not a prodigious combination puncher, but what he tends to do, which is very unorthodox, is throw combinations with the same hand. When he was fighting William Silva, he'll throw a jab and 2 left hooks straight away with the same hand, so 3 punches, and that's very unusual. Surprised William Silva a little bit as well. And later on in the fight, he'll throw a jab, but he'd lunge in with the jab and fire a left hand straight to the body after. So almost like a bolo punch to the solar plexus with the same sort of lead hand. The shorter the distance between the two fighters, the more disguise he's able to get on his punches. But he's very flat-footed, tends to hop around a little bit. Now, when he's hopping around, it's going to make it very, very easy for Vasiliy to land. Now, Lomachenko, when he fought against the fighter who was hopping in Anthony Crolla, when Crolla was hopping with the high guard position, he wouldn't throw any punches. As soon as he stops hopping around and he drops the high guard, he's then in a position to initiate the exchanges. So very easy for Vasiliy to see. With Jorge Linares, Luke Campbell, and Pedraza, 3 very good boxers. What those 3 boxers did in particular was that they're able to glide along the canvas. You have very good footwork as well. So they're initiating a lot of the exchanges, making it difficult for Vasiliy. So not telegraphing their punches. What Luke Campbell was doing very well is that he's a much taller fighter. Now, against Jorge Linares, he was a little bit too upright. So he's giving away his height and his reach. But against Vasiliy, he was able to come down, bend his from the waist a bit, come down. So therefore, he's able to have more of an advantage in his height and his reach. And he was able to fence and probe and look for openings and try and set up his backhand. And that was a good tactic. So it was much harder for Vasiliy to switch, to move around, to kind of, fence with his own lead hand. But Vasiliy is the master problem solver, and there is a common denominator in all of these fights, is that Vasiliy will get stronger and stronger during the fight, and eventually he will back down. He will make his opponents fight on the back foot. He'll get more ferocious, and he'll come straight through the middle with his combination punches as well. The advantage he's going to have in this is that Teofimo does change stances, but he changes stances defensively, I noticed. Quite odd what he does. He'll fire the right hand, but when with his momentum, he'll come into southpaw, but he won't throw any punches, but he uses that southpaw stance defensively to try and sort of move out of range, which very unorthodox, but did work, but up against much weaker opponents who didn't really have the speed or the punching power to sort of capitalize as well. So in this fight, official strategy-wise, we know that Teofimo Lopez has brought forward excuse me, Joey Gamashi was a pressure fighter back in the day. So with all of the anecdotes we're getting from Teofimo and the changes in his corner, it may be an idea that he's going to try and walk down Vasiliy, which is not a bad idea. You've got to take the initiative away from him. But when you're not blessed with prodigious footwork or foot speed, or really have that speed and kind of telegraphed a little bit with your punches, against a master boxer, against somebody with the greatest footwork in boxing currently, there's no doubt about it. No one comes even comparably close to the skills and the ability he has with his footwork. A fighter who can change stances as comfortably as anybody in boxing. I think Vasiliy would be better off siding against, fighting in southpaw against an orthodox fighter like that. I think he can get prime foot advantage the way Magdalena was, but Vasiliy is going to be able to target that body a hell of a lot easier up against somebody who's definitely struggling at the weight. We know that he was around 160, 170 pounds. He's definitely gone through fat camp. He's not he's not a disciplined athlete. So his footwork, so his feet and his body are definitely going to be conducive, to body punching. And Vasiliy can take out opponents with one punch to the body, as he did with, Jorge Linares, suffered a flash knockdown, but he knocked out Linares instantly with a left hand to the body. Reminded me a little bit of Stanley Ketchel and Jack Johnson up at heavyweight. Jack Johnson, knocking him out almost within seconds of being knocked down by Ketchel, the middleweight who was coming up. Going to be interesting sort of dynamics, official. If Teofimo really does believe that Vasiliy cannot fight on the back foot, then he's in for a rude awakening.
He is definitely. Look, I would understand him changing styles if he was about to fight someone else, but such a big fight and against a fighter who has a much better footwork. Not only because of that, but also Teofimo himself, he doesn't look very good going forward. He cannot set up his punches now. He showed me against even against Magdaleno, against whom he struggled in the fight, as well as in his fight against Kosei. He showed me that he's a thinker. He knows how to set up counter punches, but when those fighters are coming at him, him being on pressuring Loma, I do think it's a terrible, terrible thing to do against him. In fact, recently I was on our friend's Fight Film, aka Precise channel, and I left a comment saying that if Teofimo really does consider coming forward against Lomachenko and pressuring him, he would be doing half of Lomachenko's job, because Vasiliy would use that time that he's stepping in, use his much quicker feet to get his front right foot out of his left foot even quicker. And kind of like in that regard, it reminds me of what Pacquiao is doing. And that's why, in fact, that's why he struggled in those fights at 135. Not only his opponents were bigger, but they were very defensive against him. Now, but look, there are many things that you said, and I would like to go back to the beginning, to what you said in the beginning, and go through recent Lopez's fights as well as Lomachenko's. Now, first of all, I do hope that Lomachenko treats him as a child in the ring, just like he was doing at the negotiation table, because I do understand everybody, all the fighters wanting to get money. But it was crazy for me that Lopez somehow thought that, and without me really wanting to get into politics, okay, good enough for him if he got that money and we got the fight. There's nothing to complain. But Loma is a pound for pound number one, and not only that, but much more known fighter, treating him like a child because he said, okay, let's fight. Yeah, I'll give you a part of my money so you're satisfied and you get in the ring with me. So I hope that he's gonna treat him the same way in the ring, like a child. Now, speaking of Loma being number one pound for pound fighter, and Crawford, just like you said, I mean, in the lower weight classes, Crawford was looking like a malnourished Ethiopian, and okay, good enough for him. He was able to make the weight, but also most of the time those were nobodies. And on the other hand, I would say one thing which many of Loma's detractors use. Yes, it's true that throughout his professional career, Loma hasn't been fighting all-time great fighters. It's clear because there were no no all-time great fighters in his divisions, in the divisions he competed in pro rankings up till now. Uh, that's true, but however, two things that people should not forget. First of all, is that the way he was making them look is really he was really showing in those fights that he was levels above his competition. Sorry, so unlike Crawford, who would struggle against much lesser opponents, and even at the lower weights where he was extremely huge. And I do completely agree that 147 is his real division. Well, Loma, look, people even complain about him not moving up to 140, etc. But people should consider one thing: they should go onto his box rack, see how old is he, and see at what age he became a pro. Now, how old is he now? About 32, 33 years old, maybe.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah, so it means that he doesn't have any room to grow. If he became a pro at really early 20s, he would be remembered for climbing up more weight divisions. But it's logical, being that his pro career started so late. It's obvious that he you cannot force him to jump up the weight classes. Uh, Imagine if he started his pro career at, let's say, the age of 18, he may be remembered as a career 126 pounder or 130, something like that. But it's very visible that at 135, um, he's uh, he's overpowered by his opponents, and it's only because of his skills and his physical gifts that he's able to overcome and still make them look bad. Now, Teofimo, uh, yeah, I definitely remember that fight against Kosei the same way as you, and yeah, that counter punch showed me that he's a tinker, that he really knows how to set up punches, counter punches. Um, but it's still on the back foot, and the difference is uh, right before the fight, right before the Teofimo fight, the one where Kosei disposed of his opponent in like what, 1 or 2 rounds. It was a fight or two before the Teofimo fight, and I was telling people, man, it would be so easy to sneak a truck right in between. Kosei is 1-2, so yeah, Kosei, he is good, but I saw what would be his problem against Teofimo. But okay, credit to him. Against Magdaleno, he struggled. He took him too much time to dispose of him, and got outboxed in many occasions, many rounds. But I would say one good thing that many people missed in that fight was how he started timing him with his right hand. I always bring up this example. You remember in the Pacquiao Bradley rematch, how Bradley uh, he he threw his right hand not at Pacquiao, but at uh, at his left or at the right of Pacquiao, because he knew Pacquiao was about to step to his right, to that blind angle, and he caught him that way. Well, it surprised me from Teofimo. I caught it. It was somewhere in the middle rounds, I think, that he caught him with that same punch, maybe even 2 times, something like that. So at least 2 times. So I was sure that it was not how do you say it? It was not an accident. That because he already did it twice against Magdaleno. Now, of course, Magdaleno is not the same quality, same caliber of fighter as Loma is. Loma has much better foot speed, feints, much better feints, can give Teofimo many more different looks. So of course it would be much harder to land that same type of punch that he landed against Magdaleno, against Loma. What else is there? Yeah, I told you about how bad to
Sure.
meet you. Yeah.
There's one point I want to make regarding the Richard Comey and the Teofimo Lopez fight, which plays a little bit into here. Now, I mentioned before that Comey was having success in the first hand with counter right hands. The problem was that whenever he threw that counter right hand, his left hand was nowhere near his chin. So his chin was exposed. So although Lopez was getting hit repeatedly with that counter right hand, he must have gauged and sort of taken that data in that Comey is not protecting his chin. So in the second round, it's set up beautifully for him to counter the counter with his own right hand, knowing that when Comey launches into his own counter right hand, his chin is going to be exposed. Now, you watch Vasiliy Lomachenko whenever he's been countered or there's a counter attempt on him. If he's fighting from southpaw, his left hand, his power backhand, is protecting his chin. His chin is actually very well protected during those exchanges as much as he can. He's a super aggressive fighter now. There are going to be various stages, but his chin is not hanging. Conversely, Teofimo Lopez's chin is always hanging because he tends to roll off punches off his shoulder and then come back. So catch with the shoulder and come back with the counter. Not always doing that, but he tends to do that to get prime position to land. Certainly that the jab and left hand to the body, but then he'll come back with that shoulder roll. But when he's coming back with the 1-2, that's when he changes over stances and then comes off the angle from a southpaw angle. But it's not done with a great deal of velocity. So somebody like Vasiliy, who's always circling the target, will able to literally stop Lopez from actually turning southpaw. I think he'll get prime position on the outside, and how he'll do that is with his right hook, what he was doing to Luke Campbell, another southpaw as well. But the key for me is that up against good classical boxers, Vasiliy was at times able to out jab these guys, having 5 inches of reach disadvantage, eventually, out jabbing them, just coming underneath and dictating the terms of the fight. So once he took away Luke Campbell's jab, he was able to start breaking him down because everything was coming off Luke Campbell, fencing very well. Now, Pedraza was using good footwork. He was trying to mimic whenever Vasiliy would move, he would mimic his own movements to try and shadow what Vasiliy was doing. A different sort of strategy, but it was quite an effective strategy until Vasiliy, began to sort of break him down to the body as well. And that fight really should have been stopped. Pedraza was getting repeatedly hurt, knocked down 2-3 times. And yeah, that should have been stopped. Probably would have been stopped had he been on any other television network, certainly on any rival network. Now, with Jorge Linares, a guy who can box and punch, who was actually countering Vasiliy quite well early on, that was a great fight. And Jorge Linares certainly carries power as well. So it shows Vasiliy's versatility up against 3 guys who can all box. Linares definitely being the heavier puncher. Luke Campbell being more of a classical boxer. and but there are also who can definitely counter punch, probably better than what Luke Campbell can. But Vasiliy was able to dictate the not only the real estate where the fight was being fought, but he was able to become more and more aggressive. Take away their attributes and how they would set up their power punches and just break them down. Be the aggressor, get them backing up these guys, get them backed up against the ropes, which he was doing against certainly against Luke as well. So it doesn't matter, it almost begs the question that what advantages does Teofimo Lopez have? Does he have any advantages going into this fight? Official, does it matter that he's taller, heavier? Does he have more stamina than Vasiliy? He's never really gone. Nakatami's that was the one time he'd gone to 12 rounds. I think before that, his fights were all being stopped relatively quickly, as he was just knocking down his opponents. So, does he really have the endurance, the stamina? Can he deal with the mental pressure that Vasiliy is constantly exerting on his opponents? And that's the one key psychological warfare that he will have. He will be Teofimo's brain. His neural receptors will be overloaded, and I think they will short circuit at some point. Given the pressure that he's putting, he's constantly posing questions. Which angle is he going to come at? Is he going to be here? Is he going to be there? It's just perpetual motion. It's a it really is it's the coup d'etat, man. He's going to be facing the coup d'etat.
The one thing that, and I really had to think hard of the possible advantages he would have over Lomachenko. And I would not call it an advantage, but a tactic would be to maybe, because I definitely don't agree with him coming forward. I would expect him, if he was smart, to kind of try something what Campbell was doing, trying to time Loma, jumping in the pocket, so timing with body shots, being that he's a very powerful. I would expect him to do that, honestly, in my opinion. So that way I can see him hurting Lomachenko. But just like you said, and look, let's compare him to the other three of Lomachenko's recent opponents at 135. Linares, then Pedraza and Campbell. What Linares was doing, yeah, he has a nice footwork, not bad footwork, but combination punching, and he was a couple of times he even surprised caught Loma with some good punches, because he was throwing 5, 6, 7 piece combos, and all of them starting with body punches. So it can, it's quite difficult to catch Loma upstairs. And in that regard, it reminded me of what Butaev was doing against Besputin. Although, of course, Besputin was much more predictable than Loma is, definitely. But yeah, starting with throwing a lot of combos, 5, 6, 7 piece combos up and down. It really confused Loma in the beginning and caught him with some nice punches. Okay, not everything was landing out of those combos that Linares was throwing, but it certainly looked good for the viewers, for the judges. But the difference is Lopez has a much lower punching output, and yeah, he can. And as you pointed out, with throwing combos with the same hand, he can set up nice combos, but rarely. He's not a combination puncher, so that thing is falling out I mean, I don't see Lopez being able to do that. Now Pedraza, not only he was taller and what you already explained about that fight, but he was in a perpetual motion, just like Lomachenko, just like you explained, when he was not throwing punches and he was throwing combos, quick combos, not telegraphing his punches. Plus, he can switch hit easily, so it was easy for him to throw combos and even switch stances. Uh, During his combos, and when he was not throwing punches, he was either moving with his feet or using a lot of upper body movement. But it was just enough to negate Loma's offense, not necessarily catch him with meaningful punches or hurt him. And in fact, that's why Loma is not looking that great at 135, because those are longer fighters, bigger, and plus fight him defensively. They don't even fighting Loma is a bad expression. They're it looks as if they are in a survival mode. Now Campbell, yeah, he doesn't
Quick
have
question, official. How
yep.
many how many incumbent world champions are fighting at a weight category that is not their prime? You know, there's
Uh,
hardly any champions who are taking that significant risk. You can say Usyk is at heavyweight. You know, he's only 6 feet 3 up against fighters potentially even 6 feet 9. Now that's risk, massive return, and Vasiliy, you know, fighting at 135 pounds. But apart from that, boxing is just a plethora of weight bullies. You know, Teofimo clearly shouldn't be at 135 pounds. So your advantages are always going to be neutralized by that sort of composition. In that, you what you're trying to do is true pound for pound status. And what Crawford has to do, in my humble opinion, and I haven't heard anybody else, is he's going to have to win titles at 154 pounds, because that would be what Vasiliy is effectively doing, winning championships at a weight category above your prime, to be then considered. Then you can match the resumes, and Vasiliy is what beaten 12 champions starting from his second fight. So the resumes is already significantly better, although Terence has undisputed what Vasiliy doesn't have. But if he beats Teofimo, then for me that's effectively undisputed, and he's even number one even before doing that, and Terence would have to win multiple titles at 154. So it's nothing to do with a subjective argument. That's the argument. That's pretty clear. That's the objective way of looking at the pound for pound rankings. We know that everybody has their own subjective criteria, which to me makes no sense. Some people say only fighters with world titles are on my pound for pound list, and well, does a championship necessarily make you a great fighter? You know, there's plenty of guys who haven't got titles who are you know, Kosei Tanaka doesn't have a championship at the moment. You're telling me he's not a pound for pound level fighter? So that doesn't really make any sense. But one thing I wanted to ask you, official, was that um, the um, the ensuing period for both fighters. Now, both of them have been out of the ring for a significant period. Now, the lockdown's been more prevalent in the United States. I don't know whether Teofimo has been back to Honduras or whatever, but Vasiliy has been back in the Ukraine, and we know he's been busy with a new gym, commitments. But the Ukraine has been pretty much free. There's been no major restrictions over there, so he's been training. The gyms have not been subject to any lockdowns, so one would imagine that he's had a very relaxed, nothing too strenuous, but he's been able to get good sparring. He's been able to train freely. Um, Absolutely no issues, I gather, with his weight. No fat camp. I think he's the sort of fighter that almost has to gain a couple of pounds just to make 135. So that shows. Um, Teofimo, conversely, uh, pretty much the opposite. Quite a turbulent sort of family structure that he has with his wife and his the differences between his wife and his and his parents. I don't know whether that there's been a reconciliation, but it can't be easy, taking sides, having to choose between your wife or your parents when your father's your trainer as well. We've seen pictures of him being significantly heavy as well, but he has to be motivated. He has to be fired up for this fight. But we don't know how much training he's undertaken, how much high quality sparring he has had. Both of them a significant time out of the ring. Vasiliy having obviously a major amateur. So he's had a lot of miles on the clock, and the only problems that these sort of fighters and Vasiliy and Usyk will have now is their bodies will start to break down, and we've seen that with Alexander as well. They're not indestructible cartridges that they have in their joints. They will. Vasily's had problems. He's broken his hand against Anthony Crawler as well. So he's had surgeries. He's had some maybe some signs of definitely not being as dexterous on his feet as well, which is inevitable with age as well. So I don't know, official, anything significant from what I've said from the last sort of 12 months coming into this fight that perhaps one or two of them can accrue the advantage?
Oh, well, I don't really know. I'm not sure, but I would say Loma knowing Loma for being a more disciplined fighter than Teofimo, if one of them has an advantage over the other, it would definitely be Loma. And plus, look, on the other hand, 2 weeks before the fight, they weighed in for 2 weeks before the fight, and so Loma was 141, but that's a body weight. That's a clearly water weight. While Teofimo was, it surprised me that 2 weeks before the fight he was already 142.7. So it may be a positive surprise, but again, with him being so huge, uh, he probably still going to suffer to make the weight, I would imagine. Just just looking at how bigger he is than Loma, and that he should been at 140 a while ago. Yeah, I would say that Loma has the advantage, but it's promising for Teofimo. It's promising that at least 2 weeks before the fight, he was able to make 142.7. So it's like about 8 more pounds to go for him, and it's gonna be still gonna be pretty difficult in my opinion to make it. So yeah, and earlier you mentioned the stamina. I mean, he has only been in a 10 rounder against Nakatani. That fight wasn't even a 12 rounder, and not only that, but look, you can have a, a stamina good enough to go full 12, but going that full 12, it doesn't mean you're gonna keep the same energy throughout the whole fight. And plus you're going up against a fighter whose stamina is so great that he doesn't have any problem to turn it up in the later stages of the fight.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic that Teofimo is condemning the skills of Vasily, but as soon as a weight bullied Teofimo with Nakatani, and he was extremely um, that fight showed so many of his deficiencies. He just couldn't handle even a straight jab to the pit of his stomach that pretty much stopped him in his ranks. And at the end of the fight, he was criticizing the fact that this guy was significantly taller, and complaining and just extricating blame from his own ability, but just blaming it down to a numerical advantage that Nakatani had. But therefore, not realizing that's the adversity that Vasiliy is pretty much having every single fight against every opponent at lightweight, and he's still able to overcome the adversity and deal with all three of those fights with ease, I felt. So it almost shows the stupidity in his own short-sightedness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was about to ask you when you were talking about Teofimo blaming the size of Nakatani for his bad performance. I was about to ask you, do you mean like the same disadvantages that all of his other opponents had against him? So yeah, that's it. And plus those same that Loma has in all of his fights. Uh, well, there was something I wanted to say, but I forgot. Go on.
All right, official. It's now time for the corruption mode. We're gonna have to entertain one other possible scenario as well. Should the fight last the 12 rounds, hypothetically, it's a close fight as well. The decision. Now, Bob Arum has clearly showed that he's a deplorable, wretched animal who's more than capable uh, of stabbing his own fighters in the back. The Manny Pacquiao is a recent situation which demonstrated that he wanted to extricate himself from Manny Pacquiao because he was no longer able to meet Manny's minimum guaranteed purse. And clearly we saw what happened with him and Jeff Horn in Australia. I think that was a scenario that Bob Arum was not only hoping for, but inadvertently sort of engineered. If he wanted Manny Pacquiao to have won that fight on points, then that's what would have happened. There's no way of disputing that. I'm sorry. And we now have a situation that Terence Crawford may or may not be the heir apparent to Manny Pacquiao in terms of popularity and pay-per-views, as it's ultimately a business. And Teofimo Lopez, he has a Honduran sort of Hispanic background. Maybe there's an avenue that Bob Arum can tap into. Vasiliy is in his 30s now. He's already a freeweight world champion. Teofimo Lopez is 22, so there could be significant upside to him. Bob may feel that he's still a working, he's a commodity, but it's still work in progress with him. Bob Arum may be looking at the business sort of continuity, a potential new star there in Teofimo Lopez, and will he commit? Will he commit murder in the first degree yet again, official? And Teofimo Lopez getting a decision on points, is that a possible scenario as well?
Yeah, look, all the podcasts, all the boxing podcasts and shows I've been watching on YouTube, from what I remember, all of them are refusing that as as a serious possibility. And well, my answer to them is I do not fucking understand how naive you are, because it's a real possibility. I'm not saying that that is necessarily going to happen. It's not like, oh, I'm preparing a defense for Loma. That's my way to justify myself if Loma loses on scorecards. Uh, no, it's not like that at all. I mean, you already said it. What happened with Pacquiao? And look, me personally, I had Pacquiao winning that fight against Horn. I know a couple of people who had Horn winning, but still, the way that that fight played out, uh, don't tell me that you would not be able to consider Pacquiao winning that fight. So Pacquiao did enough to at least consider for some people to consider that he won that fight. So him being an A side fighter in that fight, it would be nothing easier than to make sure to give him the victory for that performance. Uh, Now, Loma, yeah, he's pound for pound number one, and of course, Bob is always going to try to hype him up as much as possible as any of his other fighters, even Terence Crawford. Either is Loma the best since Ali, better than Ali, or Crawford is the next Ray Leonard, which makes me laugh, but. Hold on, let me gather my thoughts. Sorry for that. Yeah, but it's a definite possibility. You have Loma, who's 32, 33 years old, and no matter that he's a pound for pound number one, uh, how how much of that translates into him making money for Babarum and Top Rank? So not as much as Pacquiao was making, as some other fighters are making, as Fury is making, Tyson Fury. So of course, if you had a fighter uh, fighting at those lighter weight classes, being as old as Loma is, and putting him in the ring against a fighter who, just like you said, is only 22 years old. Is yes, he's Honduras born, but also Brooklyn raised. Speaks English. Is very entertaining out of ring. Very he's such a character. Hate him or love him, but
He
we were
never
already.
gives he never gives Florida credit. He always mentions New York, but believe it or not, official, he learned a lot of his boxing craft in Florida at the same gym as Jason Rosario, but you never hear him
Oh,
mention it.
oh yeah. Yeah, plus, in fact, I think that his current training camp is taking place in Florida. I think he's training there
Yeah, there you go.
for the Lomachenko fight. But yeah, anyways, him being 22 years old, and we were already able to see in the build up to this fight all the things him and his father were saying. So yeah, it can easily translate uh, against better opponents in more money for top rank. And of course he has enough talent. Look, I think that stylistically Loma is a bad matchup for him, and yes, he's not experienced, but I still think that he's the second best at 135 after Loma at this moment. I would say so, at least.
All right.
So
Yeah,
a
agreed.
robbery is a definite possibility. Not
All right.
saying
I
it's
think
going
we
to.
covered it pretty comprehensively. Let's get down to the brass tags. Who wins? When? How?
Uh, Loma. In the beginning, I was thinking about him going UD. Even in the beginning, when thinking about this fight, I was being torn in between Loma by decision and by late stoppage. But as the time went on, I started considering the stoppage even more and more. So I would say, I mean, yeah, going full 12, it can happen, but I would say Loma, maybe the ninth, 10th round stoppage, something like that.
To me, I think Vasiliy will know straight away that to take away Lopez and the counter right hand, etc., is fight southpaw, get the lead foot advantage. Teofimo early on tries to parry any jab with his lead hand. Not a bad idea, but eventually he'll move on to try and rolling it off the shoulder. So Vasiliy just gets that lead foot advantage, and he has, just significantly better footwork. He'll be able to evade the any counter right hands. And I think the good discipline he has is that he has that left hand to his chin, which every other one of Teofimo's opponents clearly did not protect their chin. Vasiliy always does that, and that's the good fundamentals. He's going to be able to outbox him. Teofimo can't outbox him. He can't outwork him. Vasiliy has the strengths in all those departments. To me, he really only has a puncher's chance. Has Vasiliy really even been hurt before? I don't think Jorge Linares even hurt him. He was smiling before his ass even hit the canvas. It's probably more out of shock than anything else. But it's an off-balance shot. It's got nothing to do with your chin. It's just your footwork at a time when he's trying to skip between mid-range and short range. That's what happens. So that's all taken out of context. I think Vasiliy will get stronger and stronger during the fight, and you're going to see later on he's going to turn it up. I think it's personal. I think Teofimo's criticism stroke condemnation has been clearly unjustified. That's the only thing he's got. But psychologically, for me, that's showing sign of his own frailties and weakness, as he was trying to leverage higher monies in the position that should he suffer a defeat, then he's able to command those salaries for any future fights if he was able to put on a good performance. So that's a defensive, negative negotiating strategy he was employing. So it was almost you're almost contemplating defeat, which I didn't like. So all of this brash, outspoken, outlandish behavior doesn't mean anything to me. Vasiliy is clearly going to, inflict pain upon on Teofimo, and that's what I expect he will do. Will Teofimo quit? Vasiliy got able to. I don't know whether Teofimo has actually come out with any words in Spanish. Is he going to do a Nicholas Walters? Come up with the El Mas at the end of the fight as well. I'm not sure. I think he's got a chance. I think Vasiliy has definitely got a chance of making him quit on the ropes, on his stool. That was what my early prediction was. I think in that Teofimo would quit on his stool, maybe round 10, round 11. But I'm not sure. I think Teofimo may last, so I think Vasiliy will get a decision victory. They'll probably try and make the cards a lot more competitive and closer than what it's going to be. I think it's going to be a comprehensive, one-sided domination. I think we're going to see the best Vasiliy. This is the most important, most significant fight. And he knows that there is a possibility of a robbery on the cards as well. I think he's already entertained that notion. He's a very, very articulate, intelligent. Don't be fooled by his sort of lack of English, just listen to some of the interviews he's done in Russian. Then you'll understand what he's talking about there. So yeah, it could go down to a maturity decision, but I expect Vasiliy, if the fight is scored correctly, to win maybe 9 rounds to 3.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that question. Yeah, so I would agree. If Vasily looks really decisive, really too good for Teofimo, that the judges would try to make that fight closer. But yeah, the question is how close they're going to make it. Now, if it would be a 7-5 type of fight in Loma's favor, then I would even expect him to get dropped. But yeah, if he wins like 9 or 10 clear rounds, I would expect him to win by but much closer on the official scorecards.
But if Vasily gets, I think Teofimo's only chance is early on in the fight. He's got to hurt Vasily from the get go. He's got to inflict significant damage. I think if the fight goes above 6 rounds and Vasiliy is not hurt at all in the fight, then it's going to be downhill for Lopez. His best shot for me is the first 3-4 rounds. He's got to inflict a knockdown or even knock out Vasiliy. That's his only chance for me in the fight.
Yeah. Man, I'm sure there are many more things I was about to say before the show, but there is just so many things to say about the fight. Small little things, technical, that I'm not sure if I'm able to mention. But let's say that Teofimo, again, maybe I'm talking too much about his low output, but it really is much easier for Loma to fight a low output fighter than those throwing combos or being active, not only in regards to their punching output, but working, moving around in the ring, just like Pedrazov was doing. He was non-stop in a perpetual motion, while I'm not saying it's gonna be as easy fight for Loma as the Walters fight was or the Rigo fight, but I can see the same type of clash of styles. Loma being, having a rather easy time getting in and out of range and peppering him up till he starts setting him up for the harder punches. Yeah, the difference is that Teofimo's counters are going to be much more dangerous for Loma due to his punching power. At least most of us would think. But again,
Is he a
he was.
is he a better counter puncher than Guillermo Rigondio? Official.
Yeah, not at all.
There you
Definitely
go,
not.
man. Yeah.
But in his defense, I would say he probably keeps his punches, his counters more compact than Origo does. So I would not be surprised if he catches him with something good down the middle. But I'm not putting too much stock into that.
If there's greater distance, then his counters are actually more telegraphed. I think
Hmm.
if they're at sort of short to mid range, he doesn't have to move, or he does that horrible telegraphed sort of step in with his lunging jab and then comes with the right hand. But if he doesn't have to move, which is okay because his footwork doesn't really facilitate that, then he's able to use more of the twitch fibers he has. That sort of athletic gifts that he has. That's where he will be more dangerous, almost like a typical ambush snake, a predator that's almost waiting, to set that trap, and then like he did with Richard and that, boom, and then you just strike. That's when he's at his most dangerous. It's not when he's pushing the fight or dictating the fight or trying to push the fighters on the back foot. There he's very easy to outbox. So if he's going to walk Vasiliy down and do that, then that'll make it even easier, I think, for Vasiliy. If he forces Vasiliy to him and he's able to, set those traps and land a big heavy punch, then he's got a chance, I think.
You know what? I almost forgot. Thank you for reminding me. I want to mention one thing: the Kame fight. So yeah, you was absolutely right about how you described what Kome was doing and what he was having success with against Teofimo. But beside that, there were occasions in both of the rounds, in the first and the second, that beside his success, also when he was throwing one twos Kame, many times he was stationary, and I'm just blown away by people uh, mentioning that fight as you know, as far as trying to give Teofimo like a real shot at knocking Loma out, because beside the success he was having, many times when he was throwing his one twos, he was eh, his feet were planted. He was at the exactly same spot before throwing his one twos, during his one twos, and after his one twos. So it was also much easier for Teofimo to time him, while Loma, on the other hand, what I would expect him to do against Teofimo is to he's going to probe him and then wait for him to counter and then counter his counter when he gets off balance, and that's what he's been doing his whole career, his whole professional career, ambushing them, making them fall out of balance and then attack them.
One thing about the sort of Teofimo Lopez dick riders, we're all predicting that he's going to knock out Vasiliy, but not cannot really give a sort of a comprehensive or even a concise scenario um, in which would lay forth the circumstances to that happening. And that's the problem if Lopez is significantly being outboxed and he lands just a single punch, and maybe he does have the punching power to knock Vasiliy out. I sincerely doubt it, but it is a possibility. You just don't know
Yeah.
with punches you don't see, but Vasiliy does tend to see all of the punches and his chin is tucked in, so it's going to take a sledgehammer to get him out of there. Not just one, I think it's going to have to be repeated sledgehammers over multiple rounds to inflict that sort of damage on a prime conditioned athlete. So that's the problem. You're going to have all the Lopez people, all celebrating, and it's going to be all these ridiculous cliches and an official, I told you so and all that. But
Oh,
what just on the basis of a single on a single punch, and that's sort of some sort of gratification for you being like the master prognosticator or something. It's just,
oh.
I'm glad the fight is here, and whoever wins, I don't really give a fuck. Just hoping for a decent fight, and you know hopefully the outcome of the fight is decided by boxing skill and ability and nothing else.
Hey, you know what? If Teofimo wins, I mean, I'm not hiding that I appreciate much more what Loma is doing, but at the same time, if he wins, it would not be a bad thing for me if he manages to knock out Loma, because I would like to see a young kid having a long career in front of him, having such a great start of his professional career, while Loma, if he already isn't, he's gonna be out of his prime soon. So yeah, it would be nice for boxing at the same time, But what you just said about Teofimo Dick Riders, I couldn't say it any better because man, it, it, it really gets on my nerves. Corruption, like all those people, like. Putting their lives on the line for Teofimo, saying that they are 100% sure he's going to stop Loma. I have my problem is not with their prediction that they're picking picking Teofimo over Loma, not at all. My problem is that they don't fucking know how to describe you. How is he going to do it?
Yes,
They're just
exactly.
saying he's gonna knock him out. He's gonna knock him out. Well, look, corruption in boxing and official scorecard, despite being the ones picking Loma in this fight, they're doing a much better job giving you the scenario of exactly how Teofimo Lopez could win against Loma than you are doing. So
Yeah,
it
we've
really
given
gets
you,
on my nerves.
that's it. We've given you all of the dynamics, all of the scenarios, whether it's a front foot, back foot game, pressure counter, goes to points, different sort of scenarios. Yeah, it's Lopez. We're not diminishing the skill set he has. As I mentioned before, we've looked at his fights and we've clearly complimented him for his ability to make adjustments within fights and very good adjustments that has ultimately led to conclusive knockouts and winning a world championship. So that is a thinking fighter. He understood what he had to do and how to do it, and to execute it with that sort of precision and ferocious and that devastating, you know, punching power that he exuded. Yeah, credit to him. That's a very talented fighter. Can be significantly better, I think, with a better trainer and a more harmony in his personal, relationship and his family life, and more sort of dedication. He could be a real superstar going forward, and I guess that's what Top Rank is hoping for in the money and time that they've invested in Teofimo, and they may continue to do so subsequently as well. But it's ultimately down to the fighter to reciprocate that and say, look, I'm in the prime years of my life, 22 years old up until 30. I can achieve so much during the sport, even if I suffer a defeat against, let's face it, one of the greatest fighters in that I've ever seen in living history. It doesn't matter that there's other fighters who had won 3 Olympic gold medals. If Vasiliy had decided that he wanted to stay in the amateurs, are you telling me he wouldn't have won a third Olympic gold in Rio? That was his conscious decision to turn professional. Otherwise, he could have surpassed any ranks in the amateur boxing ranks. So it would have been beyond any sort of doubt, because there are fighters who have won 3 Olympic gold. So it it wasn't critical to him. It was making the transition and then dominating professionally and becoming the best, or being considered as one of the greatest fighters of all time. So there was clearly a strategy that was adopted and implemented from a very young age. It's been a long project of Anatoly Lomachenko, a beautifully sort of calibrated master plan that started with Vasiliy as a small child, and that's nice to see. That sort of dynamic and relationship between father and son. And it's not only what Anatoly has endorsed with Vasiliy, but it's with Alexander and one or two other fighters in Ukraine as well. So it shows he's not this. The philosophy is not just limited to his son, who clearly has that sort of symbiotic relationship with his father, but it can be much like Customoto as well, who had other fighters. It can be, transferable to other fighters, and we've seen that in Alexander, who's very unique as well. He's always been. I felt maybe he was better than Vasiliy. I've always was more appealed with Alexander, because to do what Vasiliy does at a much sort of heavyweight category is kind of a very, very unique skill sets to have. But Vasiliy is, in being perfectly honest, his skill set is significantly above Alexander. Uh, you know, Alexander doesn't really switch the way Vasiliy can do and does, just without any sort of hesitancy, whatever. It's just such a beautiful, natural, fluid process. It's just boxing is Vasiliy, and Vasiliy is boxing. So yeah, official. The weigh-in is going to be interesting. Hopefully Teofimo, and we're praying, makes weight. We don't want no excuses. A highly significant fight, so we want to see all of the belts up for contention. And a tremendous fight, hopefully on Saturday night as well. Finally here. We've covered it in detail. I'm not too sure what's on the undercard. I'm not going to say I'm not interested, because I normally am in younger up-and-coming fighters, but all of the focus has been on this fight from the start. I don't know whether you have anything to add on the undercard, official, but I really don't know who's fighting.
Sorry, I had some problem with my connection. Can you repeat?
Yeah, I was
Please.
saying, is there anything significant on the undercard that you want to?
Well, I'm right about to check the box track. So if you don't mind, just give me a couple of seconds.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to find out what's the undercard.
So one of those fights that you're pretty much just immersed into the main event. No sort of disrespect to anybody on the undercard, but a lot of the top ranked fighters have just been getting showcase fights. Bob's got a hell of a lot of young fighters that he just allowing them to knock out, get highlight showcase knockouts, and start padding up their records better for better competition.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Most of the times, especially when that's what you get, what you're getting with top rank, especially in those last few years when you have a big fight. I would not expect many great undercard fights. But anyways, I'm currently on box track on the event. I'm still waiting for it to load, but the only fight I'm seeing is the main event, Lomachenko versus Lopez. Yeah, so there are no undercard fights listed. So we don't even know what we're getting. At least I was not really reading the boxing news. So it was probably mentioned who will land on that undercard, but I'm just completely unaware of it. Yeah, by the way, are you there, Corruption? Because if you are, I'm unable to hear you. Hold on. I really don't know. I hope this is not a problem.
Sorry about that. Just had to take a quick break.
Oh, no problem. Okay, well, if you have anything to add about this fight, please go on, because I have just another brief topic to mention.
No, you can proceed.
Okay, so it looks like on the New Year's Eve in Japan, we are finally getting Kazuto Ioka versus Kosei Tanaka, which we are waiting for it to be officially announced. But it really does look like we are getting that fight. It's a huge fight. I mean, I'm gonna let it to you explain just how many belts those guys won in their career, how many weight classes they're climbed up, and how good they are. I mean, already made in the past a video or two, or even a couple of videos on Kazuto Ioka, and who's people are talking about Canelo being, which again is true, he's a very well-rounded fighter, but compared to the skills of Kazuto Ioka, in my opinion, he's much more skilled fighter. Not saying that Canelo doesn't have skills. He's a beast, in my opinion. I do respect him despite all the shit I'm giving him. But Kazuto Ioka, man, that's that's hell of a fighter. Reminds me of Golovkin the way how good his balance is, his footwork, his punch. How do you say it? The punches he chooses to throw, he's very good at deciding, punch selection. Yeah, that's the right expression I was looking for. Punch selection, just wonderful punch selection, wonderful at setting up his punches. uh, I mean, amazing. And he can do it all. He can counter punch, he can box, which he really showed against oh, his name escapes me. Donny Nietes, which I don't know what is your opinion on that fight corruption. Maybe you told me already, but I was surprised that I cannot even remember the outcome of that fight. Was it a draw or no? It was scored for Nietes, I
Yeah,
think.
this,
Yeah,
yeah.
but in my opinion, I gave Nietes 3 rounds at most because it was very competitive in the beginning. They were fighting at short and mid range, and yeah, Kazuto Ioka was using his footwork, but still fighting a lot, throwing combos on the inside. Nietes was landing some of his counter punches. He was hurting Ioka in some of those moments, but still, I was still giving rounds to Ioka. In my opinion, Nietes maybe won 2 or 3 rounds out of the first 6 rounds, and then from like fifth, sixth round on, uh, Ioka just started boxing beautifully, and in my opinion, he really outclassed Dani Nietes in the rest of the fight. And beside boxing, fighting on the inside, he can counterpunch, he can do many things. He's really great at changing ranges, kind of like what Chocolatito Gonzalez impressed me with, and that is, moving his upper body, switching it up continuously from front to back foot as a mean of defense, which is amazing. Against Tanaka, who's a very tough, very hard fighter. I mean, in my opinion, it's gonna be an amazing fight. And I would also like to mention another card that's taking place on 23rd, I think. So it's in 2 weeks on Friday. It's a Mexican card with Chocolatito Gonzalez fighting Israel Gonzalez, who was robbed, in my opinion, in Monaco against Khalid Yafai. Then one of probably your favorite fighters, Estrada, fighting Shat Quadras, and Julio Cesar Martinez fighting on that card as well, but we are probably going to get much deeper into it the next week. So
Yeah, and
that's all I wanted to
that's what I'm going
mention.
to do. Official is I'm going to hold my votes on the Tanaka and Ioka fights. Pretty much everybody knows it's one of the most anticipated fights that I've been looking forward to. If you give me that fight and you give me something like a Duzmatov or a Shigioka at 105 pounds, I'm not really interested in anything else. So well, maybe at a junior flyweight, which is my favorite division. You can give me anything there. I don't really care. Canizales, Soto, Kenshiro. You can just Jesse Rodriguez. You can mix up any of those fighters. Colorado. You've got so many great fighters, but yeah, we'll get into the Tanaka and Ioka fight. Tanaka going for his fourth belt. Ioka having won everything from 105 already, so his 4-weight. Massive step up fight for Kosei, but that's what he's about, challenges. So we'll get into quantum science on that one with some film studies showing both fighters. Official's already done a great job with on his channel with Ioka. Some
Thank
really
you.
fantastic stuff. So I would encourage everybody to go over to Official Scorecard channel, try and look at some of those film studies and live sort of replications it's done on Ioka, and that'll give you a very good insight into what he brings. And we'll try and do some film studies on Tanaka as well. Official, we've got plenty of time going up to the fight, so yeah, we'll cover that in significant detail.
Sorry, I don't know if it's about my terrible connection or you, but to me you're breaking up. If anybody in the chat room could let us know if you were able to hear corruption.
All I mentioned is that we'll cover the fight in detail, and we'll try and carry on the film studies with Tanaka's perspective, so we'll have a collection between both Ioka and Tanaka. Get some real insight into their skills, defenses particularly as well, and perhaps any vulnerabilities that each other can exploit, ultimately leading to a prediction. So we'll cover that in due course. But yeah, I think for this particular transmission, Official, that's probably enough for all of the viewers to digest. I think it's been a pretty detailed, good long session.
Kicked me out.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Now it's all right. But StreamYard kicked me out.
No problem. I was saying that'll probably conclude the transmission for this week, unless there's anything else you want to cover.
Oh, well, no, I would just like to thank everybody for tuning in, for listening to our show, another show, the 5th episode. So I would like to give shout out to everybody who's been in the chat room, and I'm sorry in advance if I forgot someone. I know there were L Dog, Precise, aka Fight Film, another great channel. There was IBT.
Justin, yeah,
Justin Marshall, L Dog, Saint Brit Sports. Who else?
Nick, Box,
Nick Harmer, big up to him. Philo Bedo, Intangible, big up, and I'm sure he's very glad we mentioned that fight between Kosei, Tanaka, and Ioka.
IBT.
And so you will see my channel. That's the name of the guy who's in the chat room. Big up to him. Thank you for tuning in. So for anyone else, sorry if I forgot to mention, nothing personal, but thank you guys for being here. Corruption to you.
Yeah, massive thank you to everybody who's joined us in the live YouTube stream and for all of your comments. That are concluded for this session. Next week we'll be back Sunday, 9 p.m. Central European time, and it will be the post-fight. Vasiliy Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez. Kind of fresh. The fight will be in the early hours of the morning, so you know that social media is just going to be active with all sorts of post-fight reactions. So we'll be back next week. So on behalf of Official Scorecard and myself, Corruption in Boxing, we'll bid everybody sayonara.
Yeah, and P.S. please hit the like on your way out if you don't mind. If you want to share the channel. Thank you again for watching us. Peace out. See you the next Sunday.